The story is told through three voices: Dad, Crow, and the boys.
I knew I could do the dad, and then I knew I could do the boys because the boys are me.
Explain Crow, please.
The thing about Crow is that he's yours to make your own mind up about. Have you done a crow dive on YouTube?
I have never done a crow dive on YouTube.
Cancel your Australian tour.
Cancel my tour.
Yeah. I'm really one of those people where if you told me I couldn't be published anymore, I'd still write.
Yeah.
I always say, I'd like write on the walls of my cell using my thumbnail. It's a compulsion and I'm interested in it.
Let's talk about the ending.
George actually did an interview about this, George Saunders.
Okay.
And he says, it's absolutely preposterous that you would end a book in this way.
Would you give us a blast of Crow?
Very romantic how we first met.
Max, I can't tell you how much I loved this book.
Oh, thank you.
I loved everything about it. I loved the language, I loved the form, I loved the way it looks on the page. It's written from three perspectives: Dad, the boys, and the crow. And I guess it's in like the immediate days and then the subsequent years following the sudden death of the boys' mum and the dad's wife. And of course it's a really sad book and I guess a study on grief, but I don't know, I also felt like it really made me laugh at times. And I think considering how experimental it is, it's also a remarkably easy read. It just takes a little second to kind of get into the voice of the crow, I guess. And I was given this book by a friend of mine, Mustafa, about 2 years ago. And I remember reading it and being like, man, this is so heartbreaking. And then being like, oh, I guess my friends know me really well and know exactly what kind of book would get me. I also saw that George Saunders, who's one of my favorite writers in the world, he said that you're one of his favorite writers in the world because he's always asking the most important questions and then finding ways of answering those questions soulfully with his full attention in the way that make the world seem stranger and more dear, or more dear because stranger. I mean,
that's a lovely quote, isn't it?
I'm fangirling over here because and just like imagine George Saunders saying that you're one of his favorite writers. It's so cool.
But also finding a way to explain, like, not really just my work, but actually my life's mission, I think. That really explains what I'm all about, that quote, I think.
Oh, I love that. I think we sometimes find the beauty in strange things, or the strange things help us describe things that are maybe much more difficult to say in maybe more normal terms, I guess, in some way.
And how do we reconcile how atrocious this can be, how unfair or unjust or violent, particularly? One of my preoccupations is how violently cruel this world is, maybe especially now, and how to reconcile that with how dear it is, how charming and beautiful and surprising it is. And so, like, if George says that's what I'm up to, that's what I'm up to.
Yeah, and how sometimes actually you can't really have one without the other.
No, that's what this book is, a manifesto for that, for how the two are organically connected. So in your greatest pain, you will be open to potentially experiencing your greatest ecstatic uplift as well. Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, well, should we get started?
Yeah.
Usually I like to start by kind of jumping right into the pages of the book, but with your novel, I feel like we should just take a little step back because it hops between prose and poetry and maybe a little bit of play script. And it's very bold for a first novel, but of course you're already a very successful editor and publisher, and you were editing Booker Prize winners and Nobel Prize winners, and I guess some people might say you got to know the rules to break the rules.
Yes.
Do you think there's something in that?
100%. I mean, I'm not sure how well I knew the rules because I was new into my job and I never had any training. I never studied English literature and I was never trained to be an editor. I learnt on the job. But I was dealing with, at that time, what felt like proper writers, writing proper books, which needed big structural edits. And there was a kind of wild energy in me that needed a release from that. And much as I loved it, I mean, I really loved my job, but it was the tyranny of email was upon me. I had 2 phones. I was one of those people that was getting up and going to the loo at 3 a.m. and just checking whether I'd had an email from that American agent about that section of that book. And the children were very young. I was very sleep deprived. So I was operating at a kind of constant, happy brokenness. I was like cycling 10 miles across London every day to get to work. And, it was wonderful. But I had absolutely no outlet for my creativity. And it was the first time in my life I wasn't really making anything, or I'm one of those people that's always fidgeting with something. I make collages, I do little paintings, I make music, I write things all the time, just a sort of creative itch I've got to scratch. And I just wasn't making anything. And I think maybe, it wasn't so much breaking the rules as just having this kind of place to expel some of this energy. And the fact, I think the reason the book took the form it did was not a disrespectful gesture towards people that can do it properly, but a sort of yelp of, do I have to do it properly? Can't I do it this way? Can't I do it this way that answers
my way?
Yeah, my kind of, I want to find a form that feels like music, feels like doodling, feels like collage, feels like theatre, as you say, feels like jokes, and ultimately in that kind of mess might get a little bit close to how it feels to have been us as boys, or how it feels to this man. So I was responding to like grief literature and really well-written books and the kind of industry, the sort of Hallmark card culture of death in the capitalist era, some of which maybe we'll get onto this, I'm a little bit uneasy with, So it was all a response to, but at this time, I'm sure it's the same with you when you're writing work. To begin with, you're on your own. It was very private. There was no end result. There was no product in mind. It was just an experiment to begin with, and a sort of experiment in feeling. And that did relate to the work I was finishing with, because I always feel kind of an imposter syndrome. I can't write 300-page beautiful books, really neatly plotted books.
I don't believe that, but
well,
I guess
I didn't want to.
Yeah, there's also I guess some kind of innocence, I guess, when you're writing your first
thing,
book compared to like anything that comes later. Like I guess I really felt that way with my first album. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't even think anyone was going to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I think the way I think about music now is probably so much, not probably, but is so much more different to how I did when I was first starting out.
Mate, I don't know if you have, but I've tried to maintain that setting a little bit emotionally for myself. Like, if I don't know who my audience are and I'm setting up a collaboration between us where I can't predict whether they're a 17-year-old Dutch kid or a 48-year-old Romanian woman, and if I don't care, because I just trust that they're interesting and a bit weird and a bit clever and have read lots of books and have lots to bring to this collaboration that I can't dictate. I try and do that now even still, because if I think to myself, I've got an audience or I've got a readership or I've got publishers that will put it out looking like this or related to for fans of Max Porter, like, who is that? So I quite strenuously try and recreate the conditions every time of naivety, of blank page, no rules. What does the project require from me, But it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, but you stay authentic to yourself. I think that's kind of like...
Hope so.
I think that naivety is really important. Sometimes naive, maybe the word itself gets a little bit of a bad rep, but I think in that context, it makes perfect sense. It's kind of keeping that inner child alive, I guess, that allows you just to be completely yourself. And
also, why do you want to do this? Like, so as a singer, why do you want to give voice to things? Like, as a sculptor, why do you want to make forms? I'm really one of those people where if you told me I couldn't be published anymore and I couldn't go around the world talking to people about my books and I couldn't have them adapted or whatever, I'd still write.
Yeah.
I'd write, as I always say, I'd write on the walls of my cell using my thumbnail. It's a compulsion and I'm interested in it, and I'm interested in communicating this way. So naivety, none of these words that are insults to other people are a problem for me. Naive, sentimental, these are all wonderful things. I want to hear it.
Okay, all right, let's dig into the book. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the story is told through 3 voices: Dad, Crow, and the boys. And this is the boys and their father's story of grief when they suddenly lose their mum and wife. And there's the shock of grief, the chaos of grief, the absolute brutal assault that grief is, and the thing that kind of steps in to help make sense of this chaos is a giant talking crow. Now help me out here a little bit. Explain crow, please.
I was auditioning for the third part of the triptych. You know, I'm really interested in the number 3, and I knew I could do the dad with my eyes closed. I can write about pain and heartbreak any time of day. And I knew that he needed an obsession, because I think if you dial into someone's obsession, then you can feed on it. And I thought with a literary obsession, like it could have been a musical obsession or an artistic one, but I think with a literary one, then you can borrow and you can muck around with homage and influence and stuff. And then I knew I could do the boys, because the boys and me. And my solution was to do the sibling relationship as one. And that was a big breakthrough when I realized they'd be one character, because I tried to write about childhood and grief. And then when I realized they were one voice, locked in a kind of game with one another about how to tell that story, that was a real... I have these epiphanies, and they're usually formal. Like, oh, the number 3 allows me to do this, or oh, the 2 as 1, etc. That they release me. And then I realized that I'd need this central thing, this explosion, this attack, and I knew that it would be non-human. I thought about ghosts. I always think about ghosts. I'm fairly ghost preoccupied.
Right.
And you know something.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in hauntings. I believe in that we're being relatively unambitious in what we can hear and what we think is affecting us. So yeah, I believe in ghosts.
Yeah, cool.
But like architectural ghosts or civilizational ghosts or trauma ghosts, etc. Not necessarily spooky Victorian spectres.
Ghouls.
Well, I kind of believe in them as well. So so then Crow, I was really interested in Crow. I'd been really interested in Hughes's Crow. I got very interested in crows in a kind of ornithological sense. I started to study crows. I went down incredible YouTube rabbit. Have you done a crow dive on YouTube?
I have never done a crow dive on YouTube.
Cancel your Australian tour.
Cancel my tour.
Yeah. You can see some genuinely mind-blowing shit on the internet, because crows are really, really incredible. Really incredible. So clever, so sophisticated, capable of irony, always foxing scientific efforts.
And they remember faces.
They remember grievances. They're monogamous. Fascinating animals. So then I thought, well, what would a book look like feel like, I suppose, if it was crow-like? And then I started to build the book around that energy. And then I started to write as a crow. And I started to think, what if crows lived for as long as Crow has, and he's always seen human beings grieving? What would he say? Why would he want to be here? Why would he break into this flat? What would he feel about the children? What would he feel about the dad? Would he sound like lovely books I've read on grief, you know, like A Grief Observed or A Year of Magical Thinking? Would he have that kind of philosophical, or would he be a bit nastier? And what would that nastiness mean long term? And is this a therapeutic presence, or is he a sort of vandal? So I just can't tell you how much fun I had with the crow, with Crow in my head and in my heart for as long as he was. Absolute takeover. You know, like you go and see a sound system and there's just some absolute nutter who's taken over the controls. It was like that for several years of my life.
I loved it. I thought in all of the malevolence and mischief, you know, that the crow has, it's also just really magnificent, you know, whether he's real or imaginary, he just can't be avoided or ignored.
I hope so.
Yeah, I guess that just keeps going back. We keep going back to grief, which is also very much like that. And the boys see Crow as well, don't they?
Yeah, the thing about Crow is that he's yours to make your own mind up about. Someone once said when the book came out, oh yeah, I get it, he's a metaphor for grief. And that's one interpretation of him. He's also real. He's also a study of care. He's also, you know, because he's their babysitter. He's also a study of domesticity, I hope. He's also a joke. He's also an essay on Ted Hughes. He's also an essay on, like, birds as tricksters. He's also a little bit of a riff on psychoanalysis. Like, he's anything to all people. It's nice that Mustafa gave you this book, if we're thinking of the same Mustafa.
I think so, the poet.
Yeah. Oh. But, you know, the book is handed on as a gift for people whose interpretation of Crow, or whose use of Crow in their own feeling, their kind of own architectural feeling, is going to be profoundly different. He's not a prescriptive thing, and that's partly because crows mean a very different thing to Indian people as they do to Native American people, as they did in the Haida mythology, as they did in Celtic mythology. Crow shapeshifts in our relationship with him, be it death or regeneration or rebirth, is totally bespoke to our own engagement with him. So yeah, for the boys, he's really real, and that's one of the most crucial things in the book, is he's really, really real for them. There's a Dutch adaptation of this book where the boys, for theatre, and the boys are grown up. It makes me want to cry just telling you about it. Yeah. It's such a beautiful adaptation. This book's been very lucky with people adapting it, but that adaptation, because the boys are grown up, they take it in turns to explain what Crow was. And sometimes they do it very earnestly, sometimes they do it very, very furiously, angrily at Dad. Sometimes they need song. At one point, one of the boys can't really explain what Crow was, so he just sings Dido's Lament. And Crow, like everyone is Crow, weeping at what they've done, like weeping at what they've created in this boy. And I really like that. That felt very true to how I'd intended the book to be felt. Like, who is Crow to you?
I also read that you start your stories with a drawing. Did you draw Crow?
Yeah, a lot. All the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And actually I drew I'm doing now, there's this anniversary edition coming out and I'm signing book plates. And I'm using a nice fountain pen, so I thought I better do a nice job because, someone's going to go out and spend 12 quid on a book. So I'm sitting with my fountain pen and obviously sometimes it leaks and I'm getting these fantastic, unpredictable, inky, blotty stains on the pages. And it's wonderful. So yeah, that's what I started with, is little scrappy doodles. It's not so much that I'm illustrating anything that's in my head and needs to be translated from idea through image into text. It's more a way of thinking. I think visually.
Another outlet.
Yeah, and another sort of journey. Rather than sending an idea directly down into my God, I sound about 105, into my word processor. Like I need. That's why I sometimes write longhand and draw, because I need the energy that goes from brain into hand onto mark making. I think, and I want to try and keep it in my work. I hope when you read my work, you feel a certain kind of scratchy, musical, rhythmic, mark-making energy that you can't really get in certain types of direct-to-screen content. I don't know.
Absolutely. I feel like when I read that you started your stories with a drawing, it made perfect sense to me. It felt so aligned with the way that I feel like even the words kind of dance on the page. While I was reading them, it felt aligned in that way. I mean, maybe we can find a way to share some of those drawings with our readers, if that's cool with you. I share everything. I have a complete honesty complex, so any part of the process that interests people, it's theirs. Yeah, it's cool. There's definitely like a lyrical quality to the voice of Crow, and his scenes seem like they were written to be read aloud. And I guess I'd love to hear what he sounds like to you. Would you give us a blast of Crow?
He sounds like a sort of terrible Amdram mistake.
I'm loving it. This is just so much fun. I'm loving this conversation. This is too good. No, please, this is perfect.
Very romantic how we first met. Badly behaved. Trip, trap, 2-bed, upstairs flat, split level, slight barbed error, snuck in easy through the wall and up the attic bedroom to see those cotton boys silently sleeping. Intoxicating hum of innocent children. Lint, flap, gap, tap, knack. The whole place was heavy mourning. Every surface dead mum. Every crayon tractor coat welly covered in a film of grief. Down the dead mum stairs, blinkety-blink curled claws whisper down to daddy's, recently mum and dad's bedroom. I was Hern the Hunter, fawnless funt, munt. Here he is, out, drunk for white. I bent down over him and smelt his breath. notes of rotten hedge, blue bottles. I prized open his mouth and counted bones, snacked a little on his unbrushed teeth. I flossed him, Crowley tossed his tongue hither, thither. I lifted the duvet. I Eskimo kissed him. I butterfly kissed him. I flutter Jenny Wren kissed him. His fucksack sad and cosy sagging, gently rising then down, rising then down, rising then down. I was praying the breathing, and the epidermis whispered, flesh, flesh, flesh. And it was beautiful, just like me. Rising just like me, and then down just like me, pan-shaped just like me, and it was any wonder the facts of my arrival under his sheets didn't lift him. Stench, rot, yacht, cot, wake up, human, bird feathers up your crack, down your cock-eye, in your mouth. But he slept, and the bedroom was a mausoleum. He was an accidental remnant, and I knew this was the best gig, a real bit of fun. I put my claw on his eyeball and weighed up gouging it out for fun or mercy. I plucked one jet feather from my hood and left it on his forehead, for his head, for a souvenir, for a warning, for a lick of night in the morning, for a little break in the morning. I will give you something to think about. He woke up and didn't see me against the blackness of his trauma. Go easy, he clacked. Go easy.
Oh my God, that was... That was amazing. You know what that made me feel? I was like, I got to go back and now reread the book. No, reread the book with that voice in mind. That was amazing.
Oh, that's so nice.
It's so cool. I mean, I asked to hear the voice of the crow, and I got the full works.
Well, that little section is when he's a bit dram, full bang.
I love it.
He can be anything. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, and then I said,
yeah.
I could put the crow mask on and fuck yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for putting the crow mask on. That's too cool. Have you done one of those readings before with the crow mask?
The crow mask is for you. I bought it for this.
I feel very lucky.
Lucky.
I know, I'm serious. It's I'm dead. I am dead serious. That is so
wicked.
cool. And I was also thinking, I was like, oh, it must be so fun. Like bedtime stories must be really, really fun. Like for your kids.
My youngest son, who is about the age of this book, is doing a really great thing of just putting the crow mask on and standing somewhere in the house. So you just going up the stairs and you're like, fucking hell, oh my God, it's okay, it's Junior Crow, it's fine.
Oh my God, amazing. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Everything about this book, I guess, feels so personal, but there's so much praise for how this book depicts grief, and you do this through these fragmentary scenes with the dad and the boys that really just cut through to the heart of the grief and the shock of losing their mum and wife so suddenly. And I know that you lost your dad when you were a boy, and you and your brother have this really terrible experience together. And I was wondering, whatever you feel comfortable talking about, but has this experience of writing this book been cathartic, and has it helped you to process or even just assess your trauma?
I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams in terms of ability, time, space, the generosity of people around me, using art to process loss. I'm all in it. I talk about people everywhere about this. People queue up and talk to me about their loss. I'm a bit like a kind of monster. It's really weird. 10 years after this book, you know, a great many people have shared with me their pain, be it their pain literally, the loss of their family, or that they want to read this at their funeral, or they're going to bury a copy with their wife, whatever it is. Extraordinary stories people have told me. I'm full up with it, which is a problem sometimes. I feel saturated with the stories of other people's pain, but also what better way to spend a life? Like, the point is, and this is one of the reasons I'm so animated about genocide and terrible things going on in the world, because you have to afford human beings the time and the space and the rituals of grief. We have to be able to wail and scream and adequately bury our are dead and mourn. And if you interrupt that time, you are stealing from people the fundamental human thing, which is to build life out of the pain of loss. Because we all die. We're all going to die. So I feel I go and do like conferences with palliative carers. I do to work with musicians to process this, dancers, ballet dancers to process this. Like, this is the work that we must do that for each other, is to talk about pain. So I feel not so much that it's been cathartic, but that it's opened an infinitely interesting doorway to the good stuff, the true stuff. A world where people aren't in denial about the short and strangeness of this life, and that their bodies are failing and that they will die. And that might happen suddenly. It might happen slowly, and we might have a language for it, or it might be an abrupt explosion in our lives. But we're never alone, because there are works of art and people that we can find to bounce our feelings off. I think about my dad all the time, because I'm older than him, quite a bit older than him now. I'm raising sons. I think a lot about the messaging of love, how we let each other know. This is what I mean about having a kind of honesty complex. What my dad dying gave me, I talk about grief a lot as a kind of upgrade, as a kind of superpower. When you meet people that have experienced loss, there's a language there that is rich and generative and can sustain people and feed people, because it converts into gratitude and love and positivity. And so I not a day goes by when I don't tip my hat to him. And the book is dedicated to my brother. He's quite different to me about how he thinks about things, but I think he likes it. I'm forever, one is forever the age you were when something like that happens. And I think in the era of Andrew Tate and Elon Musk and Donald Trump and these sort of psychopathic variations of masculinity that are evidently so damaging for the world and for the human spirit, literally endangering us, I'm pleased to have been fundamentally formed at that moment when I was in the clouds, daydreaming 6.5-year-old, walloped around the soul by a great pain. I hope that made me kind. I hope it translates into being, I don't know, interested in pain,
Yeah, it's beautiful, because in so many ways, what you've taken from your experience, you're also giving back to the world. And it's beautiful that it's manifested in this way, I guess, for you and for others.
I'll tell you what I do get. You get the same, because you're a hugely influential pop star. In a much smaller way, I get a lot of hugs. People come up to me, like 85-year-old Bulgarian women come up to me and they queue up and they've got their weathered copy of this book and they go, "Don't want a signature, just a hug."
A hug.
Because they feel like what was
Beautiful.
weird about this book or unpublishable about this book was true, which is that people feel mad. People feel utterly mad with pain and disoriented, and language doesn't work for them. They feel like they want to go squawking and cronking around the block, and they feel like they want to murder their existing parent, or they want to smash the most precious, this sort of the madness in the book, the unruliness, the sort of the expression of something slightly taboo or inappropriate, given that we're all supposed to be just stood with our glass of wine at the funeral in our horrible M&S suits going like, "Oh, she was lovely." "No, she wasn't. She was fucking awful." Whatever. Like, there's a kind of ripping of that off that people really like. So if I've done one thing, it's just give people permission to verbalize that. And if they find me and give me a hug, that's all the nicer.
I love that. I love that. I love it. It's so good. You mentioned it a little bit about the additional character in the book, which is the poet Ted Hughes, who I guess his presence is felt throughout. And I know that you have a bit of an obsession with him. So tell me, what's the draw with Ted?
My Ted Hughes shelf is just out of shot that way.
Is it?
It's actually a shelf and a half now. Well, look, Ted, I'm really interested in the question which now has become one of the biggest questions of our time, which is, what do you do about bad people that make good work? Do you bin them? And I'm generally I know you spoke to my friend Ocean a while ago. I'm on Ocean's side, which is that you don't bin, you wring them out. You take them into your own space. You take everything that's useful or interesting, cancellation as a tool is not going to be generative for writers or thinkers or feelers. We have to think, what is it I don't like this? What about this work that hasn't survived? What about this person that is disquieting? And arm yourself with the facts. And with your own completely bespoke interpretation of it. For Ted, I think Ted Hughes is one of the greatest poets that's ever lived. And in the language, to steal Seamus Heaney's funeral quote, he's the guardian spirit of the language. He was years ahead of his time in terms of ecology, ecological thinking, the environment. He had shamanistic ways of thinking about the relationship between humans and non-humans that are the old ways. And they're coming back because they're in those ways of thinking as indigenous cultures knew. We are not different to or better than this planet. We are the recipients of this planet's gift to us, and we need to look after it, otherwise it's gone. He was right. So you can roll your eyes at that kind of, that kind of thinking, and the badger spirit and the salmon and the river of, but he was plugged into what I consider to be the truest and realist tradition. And he was also evidently a complete shit. I don't forgive him that, and I'm not especially one of those people that wants to gorge on kind of Sylvia and Ted biographical product, but a lot of it's really interesting in how we do. There are now books about that industry that are really interesting, actually. How do we make sense of the bad behavior of our artists? Who gets to tell the story? It just so happened that two of the greatest poets of the 20th century, who both had, galaxies worth of combustible neutrons powering around their work and their lives, met and exploded into each other.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy and a fascinating story. So I continue to just be really interested in Hughes and Plath and poet. Poetry is my safe space where no one can tell me how to read it.
Interesting. I haven't read much of Ted Hughes' poetry collection. I think for me in school, I went to a girls' school, so it was Team Plath was the thing.
Well, but, Team Plath aren't wrong. Team Plath aren't wrong.
No, yeah.
I think if you would take, if my personal, obviously read Crow because it will knock your socks off and it's wild and ugly and still fascinating.
Well, I was actually going to talk to you about that because I haven't read it, but I understand that it's it's epic and it's a bit strange. And I actually was wondering how similar is your Crow to Ted Hughes' Crow?
Ted Hughes' Crow is very sort of traumatized 20th century, does battles with God. There's a phallic, a knowing but pretty 70s energy around Ted's Crow. And he's very much borrowed from the kind of tradition of the trickster. My Crow is sending himself up. He knows he's a joke. He's a bit more self-deprecating. He's less poetic and more pathetic, I suppose. He's much more he's much more kind of babysitter, yeah. But I think that if I was to recommend you a Ted Hughes book, just to order yourself a Ted Hughes book and then just open it at any random page, there's a book called River.
Okay.
And I think if you open that at a random page, you're getting some of the most beautiful writing that's ever come out of this island.
Wow, all right. I'll get that book for sure. Let's talk about the ending. By the final section of the book, we've seen some glimpses of life evolving for Dad and the boys. Not moving on, definitely not moving on, but there's a change. So much so that Crow has gone, perhaps forever. And then we end with this beautiful scene on the beach. And you've said before that endings are hard, but I feel like you captured this one perfectly. Did you feel the same way?
I think endings are a problem because they're false things. When do you finish a painting? When do when you finish a song, I imagine that you're I could carry on playing with this forever. Yes, it's achieved a moment it can reach its audience, or the engineers get out of the studio or whatever. Do you're done.
Time's up. Yeah, exactly.
But we are gonna keep playing forever with this form, aren't we? With these tools that we've chosen. With this book, I don't know what happens to me. Basically, I write really sad stuff, sometimes quite bleak stuff, and then I feel a responsibility, especially now I've got a readership. But I felt it before, for this sort of major chord, for this kind of uplift. So I'll break your heart. Sure, no problem, I can do that. But the harder job is to actually give you something to chew on, something to feed on, some nutrients for your forward journey, And that's why I get this accusation of sentimentality that I think is really funny, because it people are a bit uneasy with the hug, with the man with the man opening his chest and saying, here you are, see it, have it all, have everything, have this like, ta-da! But with this book in particular, I put them on the beach. In my mind, it's a beach called Shingle Street, but I never said that. And some people come up to me at readings and go, I knew it was Shingle Street. It's a place I went as a kid. George actually did an interview about this, George Saunders.
Okay.
With Zadie Smith. And they're talking about, it's years ago, and he says, or one of them says, have you read this book? And they're like, oh yeah, I read it. And then they talk about the ending, and he says, it's absolutely preposterous that you would end a book in this way. This kind of like, I love you.
Gleaming, glistening.
But they talk about how I've earned it. They talk about where you're taken in order to earn that ending. Because it's not an ending that works on its own. Because you have to have gone to the very unstable ground, the moments of total insanity, the moments of real heartbreak in order to earn or understand this uplift. I don't know, I want people to close the final page and feel something, and then maybe realize that is something that wasn't dictated or prescribed by me. It was already in them. All I've done is flick it. All I've done is wake it up. I like the ending of the book, and they just made a film of this book with Benedict Cumberbatch playing the dad, and there's these two boys. They're incredible, these two boys that play the brothers.
Yeah, it was at Sundance. I'm dying to see it.
I'm looking forward to people seeing it. It's beautiful. But at the end, they do this scene, and it's lovely, and there's not a dry eye in the house. And then there's a Sandy Denny tune that plays at the end, a Fairport Convention tune, and and it feels like, that what I think about the difference between music and literature, and I don't know, as someone that is expert in both, I don't know how you feel about this, but music goes in quicker, hits harder. Like music is a quicker access. It makes you dance immediately. It makes you feel like you're in conversation with God straight away. There's nothing like music. When it hits you, as Bob Marley says, you feel all right. Yeah. And literature's different. It's slower to imbibe. It has to go through symbols on the page. Do you know what I mean? And be according to systems that already exist within you, your socioeconomic or psychosexual or political apparatus for hearing it is different. But I am always interested in how can literature be a little bit closer to music? How can it knock you, shock you, uplift you, drop you down, So I am writing I'm not from the kind of mathematical plot end of the spectrum of writers. I'm from the kind of oral tradition. How can I feel this in my heart? How can I get that heartbeat into the prose? And then when I take that away, how can I crash that,
Completely.
So if the ending really is for me just a kind of experiment in positive feeling.
I love it. I thought it was a perfect ending.
Oh, thank you.
And I wonder if a fitting way to finish this conversation would be with another short reading. Maybe this is a good place for you to read a passage from Dad.
Yeah. There's no mask for Dad.
Yeah.
They played at birds. They played at lions. They played at dinosaurs, trucks, thundercats, kung fu, lying, sport. There was very little division between their imaginary and real worlds, and people talked of coping mechanisms, a normal childhood, and time. Many people said, you need time, when what we needed was washing powder, knit shampoo, football stickers, batteries, bows, arrows, bows and arrows. There was very little division between my imaginary and real worlds, and people talked of sensible workloads and recovery periods and healthy obsessions. Many people said, you need time, when what I needed was Shakespeare, Ibn el-Arabi, Shostakovich, Howlin' Wolf. I remember they left their tea unfinished, and I picked at half-eaten fish fingers, cold peas and coagulated ketchup. I remember I said, I'm throwing every single toy in the bin, and they giggled. I remember being scared that something must surely go wrong if we were this happy, her and me, in the shape of our lives in the early days, like cake mixture reaching the corners of the tin as it swells and bakes. I remember my first date, age 15, with a girl called Hilary Gidding. A coin fell down the back of the cinema seats, and we both slipped our hands into the tight, fuzzy gap of the chairs, past popcorn kernels and sticky ticket stubs, and our hands met, stroking the carpet, feeling for the coin. and it was electric. The wrist being clamped by upholstery, the darkness, the accident, the lovely dirt of public spaces.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Max. Like, this has just been such a brilliant conversation, and the reading from Crow. I mean, wow. I think I'm gonna be thinking about that for a long time. It's
the fact you can have such a deep and beautiful conversation about my work on the back of what you're doing out there is mind-blowing to me.
Oh gosh, I'm such a fan.
Does doing the book club help you kind of come down from the adrenaline of the performing?
Yeah, and it also, I love to read, so I'm always reading, and I don't know, it just takes me out from everything else that I'm doing.
Yeah.
It really just gives me a moment to, I don't know, take a step back and like forget about my everyday. It helps me dive into something different, something new. And yeah, I do. I love it. But I've loved this conversation so much.
Thank you so much.
I know you said about the film adaptations. I want to tell everyone that there are film adaptations of your work coming up, not just Grief is the Thing with Feathers, but also Shy, your most recent book. And we'll post the details as soon as they're available.
I can't wait for you to see that.
Yeah.
That's my baby.
I'm really looking forward to that. And before we go, I want to tell everyone that they must check out our Service 95 socials for a very special reading that you've done for us with your son. I won't say too much about how you've done it, but it's very poignant because it gives us a glimpse of how you write, and how you write, I guess, with the voice of a child in your head. You've also given us a playlist and a reading list, and we have an essay on the relationship between your work and Ted Hughes, which I can't wait to read. All of this can be found on service95.com. For anyone who signs up to our free monthly newsletter, will be the first to hear about it and about my next monthly read. Max, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I feel very lucky to have had this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max.